So, is immigration America's secret weapon? This guaranteed boost to the economy? That's what you hear all the time, right? But what if the reality is a little more complicated? We're going to dive into a policy paper that digs way past the headlines to ask if current immigration trends are really the asset we think they are, or maybe a hidden risk.
And this idea gets summed up perfectly in this powerful quote from former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. She called immigration America's secret weapon. The thinking here is that what makes someone an American isn't where they're from, but a shared belief in a set of ideals and laws. And that ability to welcome people from all over the world has been a massive source of our strength.
And look, the economic arguments for it are pretty powerful. The source paper we're looking at totally acknowledges them. Recent analyses show that immigrants were absolutely key to getting the economy back on its feet after the pandemic. I mean, think about it. They grew the labor force, they filled those crucial jobs in construction and healthcare, and they helped balance out our aging population. All of that is just pure fuel for innovation and growth.
And just look at the numbers here, the sheer scale of it. The Congressional Budget Office is projecting that immigration is going to add a staggering $7 trillion to the U.S. GDP over the next 10 years. That's not just a little bump. That's a monumental economic force. This is really the heart of that whole secret weapon argument.
Okay, but this is where the paper really throws a curveball. It takes all that economic data, accepts it, and then asks a really fundamental question. Is this time different? And the core of its argument is that we just can't assume that the way things worked in the past will automatically happen again in the future.
So that's the big question, right? Does what worked before automatically work now? The paper argues that if we only look at the big, top-line economic numbers, we're totally missing some huge changes happening just beneath the surface.
So here is the absolute heart of the argument. Successful immigration isn't just a magic trick. The paper says it all comes down to four things that those big economic models often just gloss over. First, selection. Who are we actually admitting? Second, scale. How many people are coming in? Third, pace. How fast are they arriving? And finally, integration. How well newcomers are actually becoming part of American society.
So to make this point, the paper does something really interesting. It draws this really sharp contrast between the historical waves of immigration that, built the country and the patterns that we're seeing today.
And this really lays out the two sides of the coin. The paper argues that, in the past, successful immigration had a few key ingredients. There was careful selection, arrivals were more gradual, which gave people time to adapt, and there was a general movement towards shared American values. But today it suggests we're seeing something different. Mass-scale entry, sometimes with less vetting, which can lead to more isolated communities. And all of this is happening in an economy that might not have as many jobs for low-skilled labor as it used to.
And that leads us straight into what the paper calls new realities and, well, new risks. We're talking about modern 21st century factors that fundamentally change the whole cost-benefit equation when it comes to immigration.
Okay, so what are these big new challenges? Well, for starters, you've got automation and AI, which are wiping out a lot of the low-skilled jobs that immigrants have traditionally filled. Second, we have a really significant number of American-born workers who are already out of the workforce, and the paper suggests large-scale immigration might just be masking that problem instead of helping to solve it. And finally, things like the modern welfare system and differing cultural norms can put a strain on our social fabric in ways they just didn't in the past.
Okay, and this all comes down to a really important concept the paper introduces: integration capacity. Think of it like a city's infrastructure. There's a limit to how many new people the schools, the hospitals, and the job market can handle all at once without things starting to break. Well, the paper argues a nation's cultural and social infrastructure works kind of the same way. It's not infinite.
And this leads to a pretty tough question the paper puts on the table. Is it possible that by relying so much on a constant flow of labor from outside, we're actually avoiding some tougher questions right here at home? Questions like, how do we get marginalized American workers back into the workforce? Or why aren't we investing more in training our own people for the jobs we need? So after laying out all these challenges, what's the solution? Where does the paper land? Well, it's not about shutting the door on immigration, not at all. Instead, it argues we need to fundamentally rethink it, and it proposes what it calls an integration-first framework.
And this framework is built on 5 key pillars. Let's walk through them. First, control the border. This is about making sure the system is orderly and has public support. Second, give preference to high-skilled immigrants to meet the economic needs of the future.
Third, require civic integration so everybody's on the same page, playing by the same rules. Fourth, manage the pacing so we don't overwhelm that integration capacity we talked about. And fifth, create clarity by making a clear distinction between people seeking humanitarian asylum and those seeking economic opportunity.
So the whole point here isn't to make us choose between a strong economy and a stable society. The paper argues for a policy that can actually achieve both, one that fuels our economy while also strengthening the institutions that hold our society together. It's all about finding that sweet spot, that sustainable balance.
And that leaves us with a final and honestly a much more useful way to frame this whole conversation. The paper basically concludes that the question isn't a simple yes or no on immigration. The real questions, the much harder questions, are these. Which immigrants should we welcome, in what numbers, under what conditions, and, maybe most importantly of all, what kind of shared future are we all trying to build together?